So we're not solving anything here yet. What we're doing, this is about getting clear on the system that we're already operating inside. Because if there's no visibility to the system, then everything else begins to feel like guessing. And most of the time, most of the time, it doesn't feel like guessing. It feels like progress. Welcome to Signal. We're talking today about signal fragmentation. And this is when nothing lands. Okay. So we say that we must diagnose before we deploy. And in this lab, you will see, and in fact, will be proven that scaling activity before diagnosing a constraint can amplify at scale, amplify the distortions. Now, the system that we're talking about here is the system that regulates revenue flow. So, revenue moves through 4 structural domains. Every business that has revenue, that revenue runs through 4 structural domains: demand, conversion, capacity, and cash. Every business operates this way. So the system, but the flow, just understanding the flow of revenue is not enough, because you can have revenue that is moving, but you can also have constraints that are continuing to grow even though they're hidden. So visible symptoms in the case of signal fragmentation, which is our pattern we're focusing on today, would be inconsistent pipeline, and the actual constraint would be a non-compounding signal. A non-compounding signal. I'll keep that in mind. So revenue flows through 4 structural domains, but the work happens in the revenue system. So this operating grid is where the work of revenue actually happens. Here, the founder can see where revenue flows, where constraints happen, and where it becomes dangerous to scale. Okay. Now, the 4 structural domains correlate to the 4 quadrants of the revenue system. And you'll see later on in the lab how this works to help us identify the location of constraints. So constraints exist in only one domain at a time. And that domain where the constraint exists is considered the primary domain. The way that we diagnose the constraint is that we look at the pattern. The pattern identifies the constraint domain. The constraint domain allows us to locate the constraint within the revenue system. And this is where we can then look at it, identify the signal and the metrics, confirm and quantify it, and then, and only then, resolve the constraint in a way that allows revenue to flow. Now, the pattern we're looking at today is signal fragmentation. It feels like you're generating demand, but it's coming from too many places. So it's not concentrated. It doesn't compound. It's coming from too many places to be consistent. Just stick to my script. So the symptoms of this pattern are that leads come in, but it's not predictable. Some channels work and then stop. The pipeline fills and then it disappears. And you're active everywhere, but nothing is compounding. The signal is split across the place where the signal breaks down is that it is split across platforms, campaigns, and audiences. So no single source of reach, no single source for reach. The threshold, I can't talk. There is no single source to reach the threshold needed for your signal to compound, to produce consistent outcomes. So the conceptual mechanism is, what is happening that this pattern exists. Demand isn't falling, but is it failing? Demand isn't failing, but it's being diluted because the visibility is inconsistent. You're spread across too many platforms to have conversations to really gain momentum, and the conversion becomes unreliable, which means there's no repeatable revenue. So the system isn't starved, it's scattered among multiple places. Now, with the lab, we have a structural scenario that is going to be our example that we walk through as we prove out with numbers how this pattern plays out in the system. So we're looking at an agency that has a need for 6 deals a month. There's a 30% close rate and a 45-day sales cycle. So this agency needs 20 qualified conversations and approximately 70 leads per month. Okay. Now, when we look at the metrics, here's what's required. To produce those 6 deals per month with a 30% close rate and 70 new leads, or 70 new leads are required. Okay. 30% close rate, 20 qualified conversations, and a 30% qualification rate. So 70 leads. So the lead in order to meet this required state, they need a consistent lead flow, and the signal has to compound in one primary location. Okay. The actual behavior for this agency is, and what they really have, right? We're looking for concentrated signal. So they have 18 leads coming in from LinkedIn, 12 from referrals, 15 from events, 10 on cold outreach, and 8 from ads. So a total of 63, which is very close. They need 70, right? But the problem isn't volume. The problem is fragmentation. So no channel produces repeatable flow. No signal compounds, and no source reaches the threshold for conversations and for conversion. But keep in mind that 63 total leads. So when we talk about the misdiagnosis, so we see what's happening. So the founder looks at it and says, well, I have leads coming in from multiple sources. Okay. And then you may think, or the founder thinks, I need more channels, more sources, because I'm not getting enough leads in to generate the conversations I need for my revenue number, right? So the founder responds by adding new platforms, testing more campaigns, and expanding reach, more volume. Okay. So notice that the response is the action that was taken, what the founder did, but where the constraint actually lives, the origin of the constraint that is causing the fragmentation is somewhere else. It's related to fragmented demand. It's related to not having concentrated visibility. It's related to not having a compounding recognition on the channel. Very different. So volume actually scales the distortion. Now, let's quantify the consequences of this misdiagnosis. So we need 70, we agree, we need 70 leads to get 6 deals closed. Okay. So what they actually have is 63 leads, but spread across 5 channels. So the result is the conversations are inconsistent, the pipeline is unstable, and the deals are unpredictable. Now, so the current system state is high activity. We're doing a lot. We have multiple channels, so we're scattered. The distribution is scattered. The signal is weak. It's diluted. And the conversion reliability is low, right? More channels didn't increase growth. They diluted signal. More channels did not increase growth. It diluted signal. So now let's look at what happens when the constraint is amplified. So we scale it, but we don't fix the fragmentation. So we increase activity. Now they have 25 leads coming from LinkedIn, 15 from referrals, 20 from events, 15 just cold leads, and 12 from ads, a total of 87 leads. Okay. The number of leads is above what we need to actually meet our numbers. Now, but it's still fragmented. So there's a slight increase in conversations, but there's still no consistent deal flow. And the pipeline is still unstable, okay? Because more input into the same unaltered system resulted in the same instability, okay? Now, there's another option. When we concentrate the signal, so signal fragmentation is fragmented signal. So if we concentrate the signal, then what happens before scaling? So the reallocation is now they get 60 leads from LinkedIn, 10 from referrals, and 5 from events. 75 total, less than was generated with the increased activity, but still above the 70 needed for those 6 deals. So the result is now there's consistent conversations flowing. Now there's predictable pipeline and stable deal flow because they're coming from one location. Signal is concentrated, right? Same effort, different structure, different outcome. Now let's step back a minute and just kind of look at this and compare. So with we had 2 paths, so to speak, that we looked at. One is we amplified the existing distortion. Okay. The other one is we resolved it. We increased signal signal density. So total leads in the amplification example were 87, but the distribution was fragmented and the conversations were inconsistent. Only closed 3 to 5 deals. In the case where we have more dense signal and we reduce the fragmentation, then now out of 75 leads, we have concentrated conversations, a stable pipeline, and then 6 or more stable deals closed each month. So growth didn't change. Growth did not change when the effort increased. It was the structure that changed the results, the signal that was concentrated. Okay, now the fragmentation spreads throughout the system. So if you are at hustle H2F, hustle to flow, you know that constraint lives when there is a constraint in one domain, the primary domain, then that constraint causes instability throughout the whole system. So here with fragmentation, when it spreads to conversion, it results in inconsistent conversations. In capacity, there's idle time. Okay. Idled and overloaded is feast or famine. And in cash, it's unpredictable cash flow. So the demand distortion becomes a system-wide instability. Now, so when we look at signal fragmentation, you're not lacking in activity. You're lacking in signal concentration. Okay? So you can keep expanding channels, or you can confirm whether you can confirm your signal is fragmented at this and determine the source. So that confirmation requires seeing the system clearly. And that's what the crystallized reality map is designed to do.